Hello there, Panda Bears, and welcome to Storytime. Today we will be reading The Biggest Pumpkin Ever by Stephen Kroll. The biggest pumpkin ever. Are you ready? It's gonna be a great story. Okay, pandas, shout out the parts of the book. What's this? Front cover. What about this? Back cover. And yes, it does have a little summary of the story. Once there were two mice who fell in love with the same pumpkin. Clayton took care of it during the day. Desmond took care of it at night. The two mice didn't know about each other. And the pumpkin grew and grew and grew into the biggest pumpkin ever. I love that. What part of the book is this? Spine. Good. And we're going to open up the book to see if we have a title page. And thumbs up, we do. There's a picture on the title page. What do you see? Some vegetables and fruit. You see some, some carrots. And it looks like there's some fruit too. There's tomato. Good. All right. Remember, the name of the story is The Biggest Pumpkin Ever. Here we go. Oh, this book also has a dedication. We're seeing lots of stories with dedications lately. It says, for Nina Kaufman, for RBL, a little seed grows large, from JB. JB is the illustrator, Jenny Bassett. So Stephen Kroll, SK, is the author, and JB, Jenny Bassett, is the illustrator. And they each wrote a dedication. Once there were two mice who fell in love with the same pumpkin. Clayton, the house mouse, noticed it one day in the vegetable garden. It was still little and green, but Clayton thought he could make it grow really big. It might even get big enough to win the grand prize at the town pumpkin contest. Desmond, the field mouse, discovered the pumpkin the same day. He thought that if he helped it grow, it could become the biggest jack-o'-lantern in the neighborhood. So these two mice, they both find the very same pumpkin, and they both have different ideas of what that great pumpkin can become. He thought it would be big enough to win the town contest, and he thought it could be big enough to be the best jack-o'-lantern in the neighborhood. That afternoon, Clayton watered the pumpkin. He also mixed up some fertilizer of manure and water. He spread the mixture around the pumpkin to make it grow larger. That same night, do you see how the illustrator made some dark gray to make it look like night? Yes. That very same night, Desmond went into the garden. He watered the pumpkin too. He also spread some manure mixed with water around it. So that pumpkin is getting double the care, right? Because both Desmond and Clayton are taking care of it. The next day, Clayton watered and fertilized the pumpkin again. The next night, Desmond did the same, and the pumpkin began to grow. See how small it is? It's small and green right now. I know, it's amazing how they turn big and orange. By the end of a month, the pumpkin was so large, Clayton couldn't believe his eyes. So in this picture, the illustrator shows how the pumpkin grew. Yeah. It started out that small, and as the month went on, this is like each week, like 1 week, and then the next week, and the next week. About 4 weeks, that's how much the pumpkin grew. Wow, that was really fast, wasn't it? My goodness, said Clayton's mother, and it's not even full grown. Clayton shrugged. All I do is water it, he said. Clayton's mother whispered in his ear, if you want the pumpkin to grow bigger faster, you should use sugar water. That night, Desmond brought his mother, Morris, to see the pumpkin. Morris knew everything there was to know about growing things. That's some pumpkin. He said. Desmond shrugged. All I do is water it, he said. Morris whispered in his ear. You should try using sugar water, he said. Wow, so Clayton brought his mom and Desmond brought his brother, and they both told Clayton and Desmond the same thing. You should use sugar water. Do you think the sugar water will work, pandas? Give me a thumbs up if you think the sugar water will work and make it grow really fast and really big and really orange. Okay, let's see. The next day, Clayton dug a small hole beside the pumpkin vine. In the hole, he placed a full bowl of sugar water. He cut into the vine a few inches from the pumpkin. In the cut, he put one end of a piece of candle wick. Then he put the other end in a bowl of sugar water. That night, on the other side of the pumpkin, Desmond did the exact same thing. Within a week, the pumpkin was twice the size as it had been. So it grew from this to this in just 1 week. Just 7 days. Yes, 7 days in a week. Within 2 weeks, it was absolutely enormous. Clayton was amazed. He ran down the road and peeked into his friend Jimmy's pumpkin patch. The pumpkin Jimmy was growing for the contest looked much smaller, right? Much smaller. Clayton scratched his head. I have an amazing pumpkin, he said out loud, and I think I'm going to win the contest. That night, Desmond and his brother Morris spent a long time looking at the pumpkin. How do you think it got that big? Desmond asked. Morris shrugged. A little luck, a little skill. It's going to make some jack-o'-lantern, said Desmond. It sure is, said Morris. A week later, Clayton noticed the pumpkin was bigger than the family car. What? During the day, everyone he knew came to admire it, and at night, all the field mice gathered round to do the same. By now, summer was almost over. In a week, the pumpkin would be full grown and start turning yellowish and then orange. So first the pumpkin's green, and then it turns to a yellowish color, and then orange. And a few weeks after that, it would be ripe and ready for the pumpkin contest. Clayton could hardly wait. The pumpkin was growing so fast, and it would soon be larger than his house. What? Look at that. No way. Then he had a terrible thought. If the pumpkin was so big, how would he get it to the contest? It wouldn't fit in his little red wagon. Nope, it sure wouldn't. It wouldn't even fit in a truck. Clayton decided to worry about this when the time came. That night, the weather grew colder. Thinking there might be an early frost, Clayton rushed out to the pumpkin with his blanket. One was not enough. Soon he was rushing back and forth, carrying all the blankets from the house. As he worked, he hummed a little song, and as he hummed, he heard someone else singing. He also began to realize that someone else was covering the pumpkin with blankets. Desmond, too, had seen the danger of an early frost. He, too, had brought blankets for the pumpkin, and as he worked, he sang a little song. And as he sang, he began to realize that someone else was working and humming. So this is the first time that I think they discover each other, right? That they're both taking care of that same pumpkin because they hear each other singing. Clayton stopped humming. He put down his pile of blankets and peered around the corner of the pumpkin. Desmond stopped singing. He put down his blankets and peered around the corner of the pumpkin. The two of them bumped heads and fell down. You've been feeding the pumpkin, said Clayton. You've been feeding the pumpkin, said Desmond. That's why I got so big, said Clayton. That's why I got so big, said Desmond. They burst out laughing. They're like, wait a minute, no wonder that pumpkin got so big. It got double the love, right? And double the care. When everything had been explained, Clayton said, I know. I'll win the contest if I can get the pumpkin to town. Desmond smiled. I'll help you. Just let me carve the pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern for Halloween when the contest is over. So they decided to work together. They can both win each contest that they were wanting to go for, right? The pumpkin in town and the big Halloween jack-o'-lantern in the neighborhood. It's a deal, said Clayton. A deal, said Desmond, and they shook on it. The morning of the contest was bright and sunny. Mice were bringing their pumpkins to the town square by truck and car and wagon, and some were rolling them along the ground. There's a big sign that says pumpkin contest. Suddenly, they all stopped short. Over the fields came the biggest pumpkin anyone had ever seen. It was being pulled by 100 field mice on motorcycles. What? 100 field mice on motorcycles were pulling this pumpkin. And there they are on the top. So funny. When the pumpkin reached town, it was too big for any of the streets. Clayton had to explain why they couldn't bring it to the square. The mayor understood at once. He led the crowd to the giant pumpkin and pinned the first prize ribbon on its side. Then everyone danced around it. Who would have believed this? Said Clayton as he danced. Who would have believed this? Said Desmond at the same moment. When the celebration was over, the 100 field mice pulled the pumpkin back to the field. The day before Halloween, they carved it into the best jack-o'-lantern ever. So nice how they're all working together, right? And on Halloween night, its wonderful smiling face could be seen glowing for miles around. I absolutely love this story. And what I think I love the absolute most about it is that when the two mice discovered they both loved the same pumpkin, they worked together to figure out how they could both be involved in their contest, and they worked together. They didn't fight and they didn't argue. They said, hey, let's come up with a plan so we can both have the pumpkin in our own contests and we can both celebrate this pumpkin. So awesome. Yes, working together is great. So thank you so much for reading along with us and listening to the biggest pumpkin ever. Thank you so much, Panda Bears, and make it a great, great day. See you soon.